So let's talk about logistics and production. On a shoot like this, having someone who is dedicated to production is essential, and that's why we have Jo. She heads up all of our production, and she is that touch point with the client who can constantly be going back and forth and making sure everything's getting done. But then also she has an overview of everything, timings, where we are, if we need any extra stuff like models or hair or makeup or a studio, hotels, flights, all of that kind of stuff comes under Jo's remit. So Jo was in charge of trying to make sure all of the different places that we needed to shoot were going to be plausible. Now in the first instance, we looked at doing somewhere in Europe for the snow shots, going up a mountain, say in France or Switzerland. But the problem with that is that no matter which airport we fly into, we have a pretty long drive to get to the mountains. And by the time we get there, we're probably having to sleep the night, and then it takes us quite a while to get up a mountain to get to the snow. And then we have a very limited window and we have to get back down, and the flight timings and all the rest of it just didn't quite work out with all of the time that it would take to travel to the right place. At this point, Jo mentioned that Iceland, somewhere that she had been recently on holiday, was the perfect place because you could just land and then drive for maybe 40 minutes and you're outside of the city, outside Reykjavik, and you've got loads of dramatic scenery, whether it's black beaches, go a little bit further and you can have something which is really snowy and a little bit mountainous. So that struck us as a better option because there was just so much that would work, and it's a very photogenic country. So even if we weren't able to travel that far, we were going to be able to capture something which seemed very different. And actually that worked out really well for us because we got some very snowy scenes with sort of waterfalls and mountainous terrain on the first day. And then on the second day, we managed to get a couple of other places and get down to the black beaches for sunset. So we got a very different, very dramatic look on that location as well. So we ticked off a few different looks within the space. But we were only there for the half day when we landed, the day shooting, and then we flew back early the next morning. So it was a day and a half at absolute most that we were there. And that really doesn't leave you much time, and you just have to get the shots. So regardless of what happens with the weather, we knew we had to come away with all of the shots of the tripod being deployed, a couple of dramatic drone shots, and then some details around all of the movements and all of the different functions and features. On top of all of that, I had to film something relatively meaningful and cool in between the shots of the guys getting the shots of me. So there was quite a lot of pressure to be able to do all of that in the time that we had. And anyone who's travelled knows there are all kinds of other considerations, like when we land, we've got to get a car, we've got to go to the hotel, we've got to check in, we've got to break down all the kit, we've got to set it up, we've got to go out to a location. So all of this eats time, and you really have to carefully watch everything that you're doing to make sure that you're going to have enough time on the location to actually get the shots that you need. Now, the way everything worked out, we actually ended up shooting everything we needed for this project within the space of about 7 days. So we flew to Iceland, did the shoots, we flew back to the UK, and as we were in the airport in Iceland, Jo had been monitoring the situation in Italy, because at that point, COVID was starting to ramp up, and Jo was concerned that if we went to Italy, in the north of Italy where we were planning to be, we might actually not be able to get out because areas were being quarantined. So Jo took the decision to switch our location to Barcelona to make sure that we were going to be able to get to the location and come back and not get quarantined and all the rest of it. So when we were in the airport in Iceland, we got a little text from EasyJet saying, you guys are flying to Barcelona. It's like, oh wow, I guess we're doing the shoot in Barcelona now. So that's why having someone on production who can be monitoring these situations and making judgment calls on where you're going to be and what you need and all the rest of it is important. So by the time we hit the ground in the UK, we had flights booked to Barcelona, we had hotels booked, and Jo had already set about booking a model. So everything was in hand. If we had had to do that, if I had had to do that, it would have been far slower. And I probably wouldn't have had time to make the choice to switch the location because I would have been in the air, it wouldn't have worked out. So that is where production is worth its weight in gold. Now, before we flew to Barcelona, we actually had another shoot. So we land back in the UK and get back to the studio late afternoon. And then the following morning, we have to be up at 4 a.m, go out, do the horse shoot for sunrise, which was really, really freezing cold. Even though it looks like a lovely, warm, sunny day, it is absolutely bitter. And I took the crazy decision not to wear gloves because I wanted you to be able to see fingers and things on the tripod so that you could see everything that was being operated. If you're wearing black gloves, you can't see necessarily on the black tripod all of the different things that are being used. I'm glad that I did that because the shots worked out, but I deeply regretted it because my fingers were absolutely frozen by the end of it. But, you know, we got to suffer for our art a little bit. Got those shots in the can, worked out really well. Laura is a pro, so we've worked with her loads before. We got all of that dramatic slow motion. Ben got some drone shots, ticked that box. Everything gets packed up. We go back to the studio, and at the studio at that point, we then have to get the office shots. So a couple of the guys at the office had been getting everything prepped for us. We go upstairs, we get the office shots, go back downstairs, pack everything up, and then the next morning, fly out to Barcelona. Intense couple of days here because we are flying to Iceland, back, shoot immediately early the next morning, another shoot in the afternoon, pack everything up to fly out the next day, go to Barcelona. We're in Barcelona for the 2 days. We get quite an early flight to Barcelona, so we've got 1 day to go around the location scout. On that day, the weather was glorious. We had sun, we went around, looked at a couple of places, thought this is going to be fantastic. And then, of course, on the day of the shoot, it was a pretty cloudy day. So although we had these lovely shots in our head, and the location scout shots where I'm taking photos of Ben and Nauki just around the place look amazing, and we've got the sunlight coming in, and we have plans for like in the afternoon we can go here, and we had the sunseeker app out, and we were working out where the sun would be coming down, all of these different alleys and things, and it would have been great. Just didn't work out like that, but we still got what we needed. The function and the features were there, and the whole location does feel more European than if we'd shot in London. So we spent an entire day shooting into the evening, and then back to the hotel, crash out, offload all the footage, and an early flight the next morning back to the UK. At that point, we have 1 day gap, and then we move over to do the studio shoot. Studio shoot, again, was an entire day, had an enormous studio, massive white cyc, and we're able to take out all of the lighting on that. So we had like the Broncolor Paras, we had the LED lights, we had some gels, we had all of the Schneider filters that we were messing around with, and that was just a really fun shoot to be able to do. We had a really cool model, and we just kind of went nuts and did some fun things, and that was it. That was everything we needed to shoot. So we had that intense period where we got all of the shots done, and then we moved through into post-production.